Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. Tonight we're going to continue our dive into Stones to Abbigale. Oh yeah, we had the school shooting. Dr. Business doesn't know how he forgot about that part. We had the school shooting. I gotta say, I'm a little excited to see how James emo deals with a school shooting. Chapter 9. The next day, Abbi asked me to meet her after school. She wanted to see me outside the church where she had previously confronted me about the letter I wrote. I suppose I could have been worried she was going to talk about something dramatic, but Abbi had the acquired habit of not letting me down. I came to trust her with my heart as if it had always felt safe in her soft hands. As I walked up to her house, she asked me, "How much have you missed me?" I replied, "How much does someone in the middle of the desert long for water?" She smiled and said, "Well, I missed you more than..." She looked around for a second, trying to think of something, only to have laughed and give up on coming up with a different analogy. She said, "I missed you a ridiculous extent, too." She pulled me in close and asked me another question. "Why haven't you kissed me?" I smiled and replied, "Well, you've kissed every part of my face outside my lips, so I suppose I should finally give something back." Her eyes lit up when she gave me a huge smile. Wrapping her hands around my neck, Abbi got up on her tiptoes as she pulled herself towards me. She gave me the softest kiss I had ever felt. A surge of electricity shot between us. I felt like she was melting into me, that we were somehow, in that moment, becoming one. We continued to kiss as a tiny thought loomed in the side of my mind. I had passively noticed the wind around us ceasing in movement just after our lips connected, as if the moving air itself had to stop and soak in this moment. After quite a few minutes passed, we began to walk home together. Our walk took us longer than usual, as we kept stopping at every other tree and building to kiss more. It was such an amazing feeling to be so important to someone, to be so loved. As we approached Abbi's home, we could hear loud music being played inside, reverberating through the walls. Her father burst out the door. I imagine he saw us through one of his dirt-stained windows. Not caring that everyone around was about to get dunked into a massive tank of his emotional instability, he screamed, "Abbigale, where have you been?" He clenched a beer in his hand as he breathed in the same way I'd expect an angry bull with spears dangling from their bleeding back to. His inhaling seemed nearly as loud as his speech as he continued, "You got some damn chores to do, and I'm sick of you coming home late every other night." Abbi and I both knew most every time she was late, it was because she was sitting outside her house refusing to go in until she could determine whether or not her father was in a stable enough state to be around. Abbi was squeezing my arm tightly as she continued to yell. You think I won't abandon you just like your mother, you little ungrateful brat? I raised you to show zero respect for me? Is that how I raised you? Cars continued to pass by, unresponsive to her father's outbursts. Her father finally continued to scream, seeming completely delusional and detached from the world around him. At that point, I wasn't sure if it was more who he was or what he was using that made him become the monster he was. After a short while of his outburst, I could see in the corner of my eye a police officer approach on foot. The officer, likely having seen this kind of behavior on a daily basis, now stood quietly in the distance with his work dog, just as silent as his master, looking on as well. Her father continued to rant and throw objects lying outside his own house. Are you gonna answer me? Are you gonna say anything? Am I gonna have to drag you inside this house to get a response out of you? After throwing a couple more rocks and bottles at his house, he began to dance mockingly. Because this whole world doesn't give a damn about you, Abbigale. I could knock you right out and not a soul would care. No one cares about you but me. You disrespect me? I opened my mouth to argue in her defense, but Abbi pulled my arm, physically insisting I stay silent. Her father saw my mouth move and exploded on me, quickly shortening the distance between us as he spoke. What is it, you little punk? What do you say? Do you know what she is? Do you even know the first thing about this freak? He violently shifted towards Abbi and began stumbling and reaching for her. Sounding deranged, he said, I'm gonna drag you in by your little rat tail, Abbigale. I quickly stepped in front of her. In complete shock, her father impulsively swung his beer at me. It collided with the side of my skull, causing blood to pour out from underneath my hair. I remained standing, but had trouble seeing. All I could hear was a deep grumbling tone accompanied by an irritating but subtle ringing. I looked up slowly to see, with my blurred vision, the police dog dragging Abby's dad away by his arm. From what I could make out, the cop had no interest in calling the dog off. It was as if he enjoyed seeing people who commit unprovoked violence suffer an even greater opposing force, as everyone knew it was over the moment the dog latched. Holy fuck, you victim. It had barely taken any time for Abbi to remove her jacket and press the soft interior against the side of my head. I could see her father's condition was not at all on her mind. She had chosen me, like I had chosen her. Not over just one person or another, but everyone. 30 minutes passed, and Abbi and I were both sitting on the ground as her father sat in the back of the canine SUV now parked in front of Abby's house. The patrolman was waiting for an ambulance. Emotionless, I knew it would be gullible of me to assume he had never seen anything like this. In fact, it was probably a daily occurrence. Everyone gets numb to routine, no matter how dramatic or strange. This officer had a look like he had seen this day come and go 100 times before. Abby's father was just another drunk, just another evolved ape throwing his life away. When the ambulance arrived, the patrolman asked me if I wanted to press charges. I wasn't sure what to do until Abbi quickly leaned towards my ear, telling me that if I didn't, it would mean he could take out whatever anger he had had on her after everyone had left. So he remained her legal guardian. Without further thought, I made my choice and took the action that was in the best interests of her safety. The officer asked Abbi if she wanted to have assistance with her living situation while they dealt with her father. She replied that she would stay with me. Are you sure about that? Kid's gonna need some stitches. Might be groggy for a few days with that head injury, she replied. It may as well have been me, and that's all the more reason for me to stay with him, and I'm not going anywhere, she added. As the ambulance pulled up, briefing the driver, he then assured her he had everything he needed to press his paperwork and left the area with Abby's father in custody. The ambulance workers stitched me up, and then while they were finishing up, Abbi called us a taxi, which shortly after returned us to my home. Abbi and I rested on my bed covers, still wearing our shoes and everything. My mind was too distracted by what had happened when we came in to worry about dirty blankets. Breaking the silence, Abbi said, "You're the most loving and selfless person I have ever known." I still felt conflicted about so many things outside of Abbi, but I didn't want to ruin her compliment. So I replied, "But you forgot to include yourself, Abbi." She smiled doubtfully. I stared into her eyes as she tried to look back, but was struggling with emotions rapidly overtaking her. She began tearing up and said, "Well, James, whatever I love, it's all for you." Tears began to fall down her face. "I love you too," I said. She started crying and pulled herself tightly towards me. "I love you," she whispered under her breath, continuing to cry. Together, we drifted gently into a warm sleep. That was chapter 9 of Stone's to Abbigale. That one felt like work. That one felt like work. This has been Doctorpiece Theater, and my name is Dr. Dennis Business. And as always, my friends,